Let's get to it. So obviously, we have both said that we both thought that SGA did deserve MVP. As I don't know if you remember this or not. I know you weren't on. You had to miss a week or something. The week that we did our NBA early predictions this year, I predicted the Oklahoma City Thunder were not only going to win the NBA championship this year. I predicted SGA was going to win regular season MVP and Finals MVP. So this did not come as a surprise to me. The stats back it up that he had a good enough year stat wise. You know, honestly, believe it or not, if he didn't have as good of a year as he had, if there wasn't voter fatigue, I thought you could have made a legitimate case for Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets, but there's no way he was going to win another MVP. So SGA definitely did deserve this. The problem, though, is what you said at the top tonight when we were talking about the T-Wolves Thunder series. And you said the Thunder don't need SGA to score 20 points a game. The thing with that statement is, does that really mean then, are you really the most valuable player, or is it just a stat award and we have to, him around this award now because we can't give an award out to the same player every single year because we get tired of voting for the guy every single year. When in reality, to me, the single most valuable player over the last half decade in the NBA has been Jokic, and the single most valuable player before that for 20 straight years was LeBron. So if you want to change the lettering to best or most important scorer, MIS instead of MVP, then yeah, then we can change it up. But I think the problem with MVP for me is it's the criteria and it changes every single year. I'm not saying SGA didn't deserve it. I'm saying we change the criteria every single year to fit a narrative.
So I think this should have been SGA's second straight MVP because I believe he should have won it last year. If I had a vote, I would have given it to him. Because as the Thunder, nobody really expected them to be the number one seed going into last season. I think people expected it from them this season, but from the conversations we had and the conversations I remember hearing, people didn't think OKC was going to be number one. Like you heard,
not as good as they were. I would agree to that. We both had them as a playoff team, but we were on fourth or fifth, not number one. But I just, again, like it goes back to the personality thing, right? Like last year, Jokic was coming off the championship. He was the marketable guy. He was clear. Denver. I believe Denver was the 2 seed last year, and they had very similar win totals. If you remember, it was Oklahoma City, Denver, and Minnesota fighting for the top 3, and they came within a game of each other. This year was different because the Thunder were 17 games better than the second best placed team in the West, which was Houston.
Yeah. And then Houston, bowed out to Golden State. But that's not a different discussion for another day. So, but yes, the Thunder don't need SGA to necessarily score 25 to 30 points a game. But most of the time he did. And I get it. Does that mean he's really the most valuable player? I would still say yes, because there were times where if it got into a close game or OKC was struggling offensively, they turned to SGA to get them a bucket or make a play, whether it was making a pass to Chet Holmgren for an easy bucket at the rim or giving it to Jalen Williams so he could get a layup, things like that. So that's why I would say SGA was the most valuable player.
Here's my thing. If you take SGA off of the Thunder, I still think they're definitely not the 1 seed. They're probably a play-in team. They're probably a 7-8 seed. If you take Jokic off the Nuggets, they may win 15 games. They may be as good as the Wizards or the Hornets. And by the way, we saw that in the second round series because Jokic, for the most part, was unguardable for Oklahoma City. Denver, in my opinion, will easily give Oklahoma City the most problems out of any team this postseason. And it was because pretty much, for the most part, Jokic, outside of Game 7, dueled with SGA in Oklahoma City. And what we saw in that Game 7 was if Nikola Jokic don't go for 30 and he only takes 10 shots or whatever, Denver only finishes with 69 points.
And I understand. Look, I understand what you're saying. And you take as Jokic off the floor, Denver looks like a completely different team. I understand that. But you said it yourself. You take SGA off the Thunder, they're not a championship contender. They're a play-in team at best. So, doesn't that say how valuable SGA is to OKC?
It does. But again, this is why I think we need to have, and I remember we had this conversation last year when we talked about SGA versus Jokic, and we're having the same conversation again this year. There needs to be, in my humble opinion, a lot like they do for the other awards now in the NBA especially, we need to have a written criteria as to what most valuable player means. Whether it is increase in win total, it's a certain amount of stats, certain amount of games played, plus minus, a combination of ETA, advanced analytics, whatever criteria you want to put together, let's make that criteria and let's check boxes. Because quite frankly, to be honest with you, the MVP discussion comes down to whatever the hell the voters feel like is a good story for that year anymore. Because again, back in the day, they really didn't care if a guy won 2 MVPs or 3 MVPs or 4 MVPs in a row. This year, like, here's the thing, I'm being honest with you. Let's say SGA won MVP last year. Let's say he wins it again this year, the way it was normally. Next year, even if he were to score 80 points a game, he basically would be disqualified because everybody has come up with this narrative now that you can't win 3 MVPs in a row because it'd be bad for the league.
Yeah, I understand that. It definitely seems like the MVP narrative has changed. I think, I hate to say this because he's the greatest shooter ever, but I think when Steph won unanimous MVP, that kind of changed the narrative.
I disagree. I know exactly what changed the narrative of MVP, and it was the year Russell Westbrook won the MVP by averaging a triple-double when his team was a 6 seed because we felt so bad for him that Kevin Durant left. We should give him the MVP when they got blown off the floor in the first round of the playoffs by Damian Lillard's Portland Trailblazers, and nobody believed that team had even a shot to win the championship. But Russ is such a great story because he did it without Kevin Durant. Give me a break.
And that's why I'm saying it was Steph who did it, who changed the narrative, because he comes in and has this amazing season with all of the three-point shooting, and everybody's like, oh my God, we've never seen anything like this with the range and like he had that three-pointer near half court.
The funny part is we still argue we haven't seen anything like it again.
And that's part of it. Like, he had that half court shot against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I think people were so enamored by what Steph was doing. Again, they were like, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this in my life. So he goes on to unanimously win MVP. So I don't disagree with what you're saying about Russ, but I think it was earlier than that.
So let me reiterate. I do not have a problem with SGA winning MVP. I would have voted for SGA winning MVP because I think the Thunder are having a historic season, and I do think he deserves it this year. What I'm saying is the NBA has pretty much told us he was winning it this year from November.
I got to see him in person because I went to Oklahoma City. That's part of the reason why I honestly want the Thunder to win the championship this season. So, me personally, I can put that little feather in my cap and say, yeah, I got to see the NBA champions, in their building. That's just me, though. But from what I saw of him, when I was watching him, I'm like, yeah, I'm watching the MVP. So maybe I have a little bit of a different perspective because I went to OKC and saw him in person rather than just watching him on TV.
Well, that's like me a couple years ago. Again, remember last year in Denver, I was there to watch Nikola Jokic. I have not seen LeBron live. I have not seen Steph live. I've only been to 2 NBA games my entire life. One of them was here in Quicken Loans Arena. The other was at Ball Arena. Nikola Jokic, the best player I've ever seen live in my life. And if you feel the same way about SGA, I completely understand that. They're 2 great players.
Yeah. Like I said, I would have voted for SGA last year. I think he should have won, but that's just me. But I think right now we're looking at the OKC Invitational. And I'll tell you this. I said this to you last week, and I stand by it. If the Thunder win the championship this season, I think you're looking at a dynasty because they're far under the cap. They have a ton of draft picks. So if the Thunder win, I think you're looking at the next dynasty.
Well, they're going to win because it doesn't matter who wins this series. To be honest with you, as we both said at the top of the program, again, I'll push back on what you said last week. I do think Dynasty is a little bit premature. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying there's a lot of X factors out there that we don't know yet, but they certainly have the experience. They certainly could do it.